This is one of those occasions where we can't really trust two-dimensional media, because all we have is images and video that supposedly prove that there's an International Space Station up there and it's been manned since 1999. One of the most visible indications that there are people up in space inside the International Space Station is that they're in zero gravity. However, NASA has an aircraft known as the Vomit Comet, and when this aircraft takes a certain flight path, the people inside feel weightlessness. So it's almost certain that NASA has an aircraft fitted out to look like the International Space Station's interior. Now take a look at this.
Hello, Katie.
Notice how suddenly as she starts to wave, she floats out of control.
This is so cool, isn't it? Hey, Katie, I want
welcome
to ask
aboard
you a
the space
question. This
station.
is Leah. Look at this. Wow.
The same thing happens here. As the plane starts its zero-G dive, the people start to spontaneously float upwards. The other problem with this technique is that this aircraft can only simulate zero gravity in 45-second to a minute bursts. So NASA employs many little tricks here to simulate weightlessness. None of their footage is live, it's all pre-recorded and edited, so plenty of scope there to use some of the cinematic tricks that we're used to, like harnesses and wires that are edited out later with CGI. But here we can see one of the tricks they use to maintain continuity between periods of weightlessness. Take a look at this woman's hair. Doesn't it look a bit strange to you? Look how it seems to spring back into place. We're led to believe that this is an effect of weightlessness, that the hair will just sort of float around. But it doesn't quite seem natural, does it? Here's video from the Vomit Comet again. Watch the way this woman's hair flows as she moves. Seems quite obvious now that this is some kind of perm or hairspray, so that between periods of weightlessness we get that visual continuity. Now, there are plenty of examples of these gravitational anomalies, but I'm not going to spend too much time on it. I just wanted to show that all these things that you can see from NASA can be simulated and CGI'd up for your benefit. They don't seem to do any real scientific experiments up there. The effort seems to be just to get you to believe that they're there. That's it. There are also plenty of anomalies when you look at spacewalks. For footage of spacewalks on the exterior of the International Space Station, NASA will freely admit they have a huge swimming pool called the Neutral Buoyancy Lab, where they train their astronauts, and within this huge swimming pool they have a mock-up of the exterior of the International Space Station. I'm going to show you a video from a YouTuber called Jungle Surfer, who's done the best expose of spacewalking anomalies.
Another aspect of the illusion of space travel is spacewalks. These are faked inside a swimming pool. It's a custom-built swimming pool, and that's a great way to fake zero gravity. About 6 months ago, in 2013, a gallon of water leaked into one of their spacesuits in a matter of seconds. NASA doesn't really have a proper explanation for how on earth this could have happened. There shouldn't be water leaking into someone's helmet and a person almost drowning in space. How can you drown in space? They now wear snorkels to make sure that they don't drown in space. How can this be happening? A snorkel in space? There could be some water in the porous plate sublimator. When they were on the moon, they supposedly had about a gallon of water, but that cooling system is supposed to be well away from their head. There really is no sane explanation for why a gallon of water would leak into someone's spacesuit, unless you realise the whole thing is faked inside a swimming pool. In this scene, you can see the Chinese spacewalk, and you can see a bubble coming up from the guy's suit. How do you have a bubble in space? Space is supposed to be a vacuum, not a swimming pool. But it's obviously just a swimming pool filled with water. Obviously, there would be some equipment that they could only fix from the outside, but a lot of these spacewalks, it seems like equipment they easily could have configured to be accessible from the inside of the International Space Station. It seems more like an excuse to get out and show their other space trick, which is the faking of spacewalks in a swimming pool. In this vid, you catch a glimpse of someone wearing a scuba tank. Scuba tanks in space? Snorkels and scuba tanks in space? They act like a spacewalk is just a walk in the park, like there's very little danger involved at all. They're looking through the spacesuits. Oh, here's a spacesuit. We're going to go for a spacewalk. As if there's no danger at all. Like they don't care. They don't care. They don't act like they're in a life-threatening situation, like they could die at any second, even though they can. So you would think to preserve their life they would want to minimize the amount of spacewalking that they did. But there seems to be an abundance of equipment on the outside of the International Space Station that constantly requires repairing, which makes for a good TV spectacle and is inspired by movies like Sandra Bullock's Gravity. And after Gravity came out, they of course had to do another spacewalk to fix some emergency, some piece of equipment that their lives depend on that amazingly they can fix every time. But you know what? Thanks to the genius of the engineers at NASA, they employ snorkels in space now, so that should stop them from drowning.
Finally, I'm going to leave the last word to one of the astronauts themselves, when he made a tiny little slip-up during a question and answer session. Take note of his body language after he makes his mistake.
Hello, my name is Bailey. This question is for Chris. What was high school like for you?
Well, it was the 1980s, so the music was different, the hairstyle was different, the clothes we wore were different than today, but probably in 5 or 10 years it'll be the same. And in school, I was just like you, probably all of you there. I tried my best. I didn't always succeed, didn't always do well, but I put my best effort into school. Math and science were kind of my favorite subject. I didn't really like English and reading too much, but I've since grown out of that, and I enjoy reading now. And I played a lot of sports. And all of that happened in a little town called York, Maine, across the United States from where we're talking to you right now.
Whoops.
Called York, Maine, across the United States from where we're talking to you right now.
Hello, my name is Steve Owen. I'm a teacher here at Riverside Prep. I'd like to ask you about the stress associated with the long periods in the space station. I'd like to ask Karen, what is the training that you get to cope with that stress and related psychological issues?
Well, for psychological issues, actually, when we are selected as astronauts, we go through quite a vigorous psychological screening process. You certainly don't want somebody who comes up here and has a breakdown or is claustrophobic. But also, we have, well, like Chris's background as a Navy SEAL and Luca's background as a test pilot clearly prepare them for high-stress situations. I could also argue that going through the process of getting a PhD can be a high-stress thing as well. And so, generally, when people get to the point where they're applying for this job, they've been through several things in their life that are high stress and have proven that they can handle.
Humans in space? I'm not even sure there is such a thing as space anymore.